Surely none of you expected me to see the character design for Recluse from Elden Ring Nightreign and not draw fan art. However, I'm also experiencing art block, so we're going to talk about how I challenged it while making Recluse fan art. So let's get into it. Hi, hey, hello. If you're new here, my name is Rain. If you're not new here, welcome back to my little corner of the internet. I really appreciate you stopping on by. And in today's video, I am going to be challenging some art block that I'm dealing with and discussing why I personally really like the character design for Recluse from Elden Ring Nightreign, and discussing the fan art process a little bit and how I approached making the fan art in this piece, because it's incredibly unconventional for me and my art style, which I think posed a really good challenge for me as an artist that I think actually benefited to me kind of artistically developing a little bit. So let's just get into it. I've likely discussed it before, but when I'm art blocked, I usually, not art blocked, or maybe I'm just having a bad art week, I'm not actually really sure what's going on with me this week, but when I'm having a tough time producing the art that I want to produce, I usually either really intentionally just let myself make bad art without care, and I fill a couple sketchbook spreads just making the art that I'm not proud of to get it out of my system, or I will go through this other method that I did in this week's video, and I will do something that is entirely new to me artistically. So I've never made scratchboard art. I didn't even know the scratchboard wasn't rainbow underneath because I didn't know there were non-rainbow scratchboards. A little disappointed, but it's fine. I've had this on hand for maybe a couple of months now, and I really wanted to do something with it. I've been really excited to use it, but I just haven't had inspiration, and I've been very nervous because I don't know really like how to use it, right? Like I can't just like sketch the way I would any other piece, you know what I mean? Like I'm and I can't erase either, you know. Most of my art I can erase, and even when I'm doing ballpoint pen illustrations, I'm very rarely doing a ballpoint pen illustration with the intention of it being finalized and wanting it to look good. But I only have one of these, so I can't really just like experiment and mess it up and also finish the fan art piece. So I was pretty nervous. Finish the piece. I didn't know I was going to be using it for fan art. I was pretty nervous. I wasn't sure how I was going to approach trying to actually like draw something on it, like sketch it out, how I was going to approach it. And so I just kind of was letting it sit on the back burner until I had a good idea or something that I felt was really appropriate for the scratchboard in particular. So Recluse is fortunately a very dark-skinned character, and so that made this kind of the perfect approach. Now I, for reference, spent multiple like sketchbook pages trying to draw Recluse prior to the scratchboard, and she just was not working for me. We were not jiving, the facial proportions weren't working out, I was just having a rough time sketching her, and I really just was starting to think that I was going to make another bad art week video this week because nothing was turning out the way I wanted to. And while I was looking for my art sponge, like I have a little yellow sponge, then I was going to use it to cover the back of the Recluse fan art. It bled through really bad and I just wasn't going to be able to sketch on it. I was looking for my sponge to do a sunset gradient for some Jinx fan art I want to do, like a full Jinx illustration in just paint to experiment with just using paint because I'm usually a marker artist. I probably should have said that. I mostly do marker art for the majority of my base with paint pen embellishments. I don't know how to paint. And then I use colored pencils as well to kind of add and, you know, zhuzh up from there as well. So I was looking for the sponge. I still have not found the sponge, by the way. I need to do an entire deep clean of my art space. Let me know if you guys want to see a tutorial of how I don't lose my mind cleaning my art space. It's so messy right now. It's absolute chaos, but still haven't found the sponge, and I ran into this, and I was just like, this is perfect for Recluse. This is absolutely great. And I don't have to worry about making her skin too light, or the undertones. The undertones is what I'm really struggling with Recluse. I really want to give her a deep purple undertone, and she just doesn't have it. But like mentally, I'm like, I really want to do it. And so I've just been having a rough time getting her skin tone how I want it to with the markers I have. None of my paint pens go dark enough to really capture just how nice and cool toned she is. I think I might need to just mix my paint all together. So it's just been an experience, you know what I mean? So with that in mind, I ran into this and I was just like, this is perfect. But let's get into some context about me as a gamer so that I can provide insight on why I like her character design the most. So Bloodborne is my first Souls-like that I have ever played. It is my absolute favorite game of the entirety of the Souls kind of genre as a whole. The story is really good. I really love the environments. It's the only Lovecraftian-ish or game with Lovecraftian elements that I think actually did a really good job of implementing them and actually utilizing them to achieve that kind of cosmic horror and God-fearing kind of environment that feels indicative. It really just, I love the story of Bloodborne so much. It is absolutely one of my favorite games of all time. And so, putting that aside just a teeny bit, I then played Elden Ring next. I tried the Dark Souls. I personally just don't really like the story all that much, and so when it really comes down to it, I just replay Bloodborne instead of playing through the Dark Souls. The story's good, but it just isn't enough to capture me when the environments don't really feel like they serve the narrative as much as I want it to. I don't know if that really makes sense, but a lot of the actual components of the map that you go through in Dark Souls don't really feel like they're feeding into that story and trying to create that cohesive experience that I really want, and it just has never, like, drawn me in. I know the characters pretty well, I know their stories pretty well. My brother and I both are huge fans of the Souls series. He's got, like, at least 500 hours in each of the Dark Souls games, including Dark Souls 2, okay? Let's be real here. But that aside, I played through all of Elden Ring, and it's, it's definitely not my favorite. I have a lot of issues with Elden Ring. The story for me is personally just too caught up in a lot of the Game of Thrones kind of vibes that I just really do not care about. I do not like George R.R. Martin's story writing personally, and so that really just damped down the Elden Ring experience for me. I already didn't like George R.R. Martin's work, so I did go into Elden Ring expecting to probably not like the story that much, but to like the environments and the gameplay enough and the actual character lore, not necessarily how it implements into the story, but the characters as individuals enough to kind of make up for it. And it didn't. If I wanted to play Running Simulator, I would just play Skyrim, okay? Like, I really just don't feel like Elden Ring captured me the way I wanted it to. The challenge and reward kind of experience of Bloodborne was just non-existent in Elden Ring. There were so many rest sites that there were no difficult runbacks to literally anything. The bosses were not particularly interesting for the most part. There were some really interesting bosses that I think kind of revolutionized the boss system, but not enough of them to make up for the fact that it is an open world game with an incredibly slow horse whose jump sucks and glitches through everything. And the characters were not super interesting. The story wasn't super interesting. I hate fighting dragons, okay? That is like my pet peeve. I hate fighting dragons. That's a me problem. If you are down to fight a dragon, Elden Ring is a great game. There's like 15 dragons you can fight, okay? Like, it's great if you love dragons. I hate fighting dragons. They annoy me relentlessly, okay? I hate bosses that just fly around the arena and you're just chasing after them. I hate running after my bosses. It drives me bonkers. It's a personal pet peeve of mine. If you don't mind that gameplay and that style, then I think Elden Ring is great for you. It just really annoys me relentlessly. And Elden Ring just didn't capture me. And the environments were not actually as kind of different as I would like. I think the capital was really well done. The Scarlet Rot area, as much as I hate going through it, is also really well done. But a lot of it's just kind of grassy fields with big bosses I don't care about fighting. And so it's like it's not enriching in the way that I wanted it to be, but that's kind of just a me issue. Like, Bloodborne really set the standard incredibly high for me in terms of how the environment plays into the story narrative, how the bosses fit into the environment, the actual navigation experience. Like, all of that was incredibly so well executed that it really put Elden Ring at a high bar to meet for me in terms of creating a really cohesive gameplay. And I should also state, I wasn't a huge fan of Skyrim because I hate fighting dragons. And so if you really like Skyrim, I think Elden Ring is probably a game that you'll really like. Elden Ring also didn't have the challenge factor that Bloodborne had because there are so many bonfires and because leveling up and getting leveling materials is so much easier in Elden Ring. I didn't feel challenged the way that I did in Bloodborne, especially because you can just leave and go fight an easier boss or fight easier enemies until you acquire the skill set you need. Where in a game like Bloodborne, where there's a much smaller handful of bosses, you have to continually push yourself to improve and push yourself to continue fighting that boss until you conquer it. You can't just go do something else unless you're farming for leveling materials and runes, I guess. I have played too many Souls games whilst sitting through my brother playing Souls games that everything is a flask, okay? Like, everything is flask and everything is Souls, even though I know that's not what they're called in the other games. Like, my brain has been overridden. I'm really bad. My brother plays so much more Dark Souls than I've played Souls games in general that my brain's overridden. Everything is a soul. Everything is a flask. I'm broken, like, literally dysfunctional. But yeah, Blood Vials, and I really can't think of the currency name in Bloodborne right now. It might be because I'm still sick, guys, by the way. I'm 3 weeks into this sickness, and I'm not having a good time. But, back to it. I really liked Bloodborne, and because of that, Elden Ring was kind of disappointing. And because Elden Ring was kind of disappointing, I didn't expect to really like Nightreign, but Nightreign is a bit of a different experience, and it does create a little bit more variety, and it gets rid of a lot of the bigger issues I had with Elden Ring specifically. So let's talk about the Recluse. I don't think anybody came to my art channel for a review of Nightreign, so I'll stop talking about video games now, at least a little bit. But I want to talk about Recluse and how she plays and why I love her character design, but hate playing Recluse, okay? So let's just get into it, and then we will talk about Scratchboard art after that, and kind of like my trial and error experience.
If you haven't been here before, I love a witch character. I love a mage, I love magic, and I love the kind of world-building component that comes with magic characters that don't exist in worlds that lack magic. You know, I like that extra element that comes with a fantasy realm. You know, it's just something that I'm personally a huge fan of and I really like. So I'm usually drawn to magic characters because I like the lore that's associated with the magic world building, and the magic system itself is something that I find very interesting. And I generally lean more towards high fantasy or medium range fantasy, something that actually gives a little bit of insight into how the magic works and operates in the world itself. It's a little pizzazz that I really, really like. So I generally tend to do routes of characters that have some sort of magic first. And then I also generally have my greatest attraction towards female characters before male character options. Now, I don't intend to spoil anything about Nightreign, because if you want to play it, you should play it. It's very new. And if you don't really like, you can go elsewhere if you want Nightreign spoilers, because I'm sure there are plenty of people going over that content, and I'm here to create art, not, leak content, or prematurely ruin the fun for other people. So to be just kind of vague about it, in Nightreign you can pick one of multiple characters for your run. And then you go through 2 days where you have 15-minute spans with a ring closing in on you, and you fight a boss. Then the map opens back up, the ring will close again, you fight a boss, and then you will fight the final boss that was pre-selected. I don't know how much that makes sense, but it's a 3-day experience, and each of the first 2 rings will be a maximum of, well, not a maximum, but they are 15 minutes and then the boss fight. Then the day will start 15 minutes, then the boss fight. That is if you don't like die in the boss fight, right? And therefore don't get to day 2. And that depends on your teammates resing you. If you're not playing solo, it's 1 or 3 player, not 2 player. So that's just kind of how it is. So you pick a pre-made character, which is a very interesting kind of step away from the typical, I guess, attitude of a FromSoft game in the Souls region. You know, all of the Souls games really have those character customization that the community is well known for their unhinged kind of character creations, and it is kind of unfortunate to not have that. But I think all of the characters and their lore and how they approached that lore being utilized for the exploration of the game was well done. I don't think if you were able to customize your character and go through this experience, the game would have worked very well or had the same type of intrigue. So you basically, the more you play your character to a certain extent, the more journal entries you unlock. You will do little quests in each game run or in the main hub, and you will learn about them as a character and eventually unlock a skin that is very specific to their lore. Some skins are more questionably awful and useless than others, to be honest. Like, some skins are just disappointing. And the character design team, I'm just questioning why they couldn't give at least some pizzazz, really, honestly. Like, some of them just make me sad. Recluse, I like her base character design. I actually haven't finished her Remembrance, so I don't know about her Remembrance skin, but I'm using the skins that you unlock after you beat the final boss of the game. You get special skins that are throwbacks to the Dark Souls series. I think I think there's a Demon Souls skin. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but it's a throwback to the previous games. And it's these characters wearing the fits of very memorable, nostalgic characters. So if you haven't played the other Souls games, it might not be as interesting, but I'm using one of those. So I haven't reached her Remembrance, and quite yet. I have a few more bosses to beat, and that kind of goes back to why I love her character design, but I hate playing her character. I really don't like FP managing, like, the magic restoration, and there just aren't a lot of, like, FP upgrades and materials that I enjoy utilizing. You have a very limited amount of slots and items that you can carry, even with the purchasing of kind of, like, backpack expansions, I think, or, like, your item expansion. I don't really know. They're backpacks in the shop, but I don't actually know what the inventory itself would be called for the character. But either way, I just really am not enjoying it, and a lot of the magic is slow to cast. Not a lot of the fast magic I enjoyed in Elden Ring is an option, and I find that I much prefer characters that are either dagger characters or utilize a bit more of an intensive and kind of, I guess, swift weapon would be the way to articulate it. There are 2 characters that are much more my play style, and because of that, the Recluse just kind of falls as, like, the 3rd place character that I enjoy playing, and one of them, or both of the characters I enjoy playing, you have to beat or play the game to be able to actually get and utilize them, so I won't be discussing them any further, and it's actually why I didn't do fan art of them. I want to wait until the game is a little bit more out and have been out for a little longer and more people are creating fan art before I share any fan art of my own, because I want people to be able to enjoy and kind of find the characters and find them for the first time on their own. And I don't want to, like, I don't know, I like to give it a couple of weeks to a couple of months when there's kind of, like, supposed to be secrets. I know it's not really a secret if you can just look it up or you'll find them randomly on the internet, but I don't like contributing to that kind of aspect of things. So basically, she is a witch, basically, But I really, really like her skin tone and hair color combination. And I love how dark her color palette is and how lacking it is in medium tones. Her skin is a very, very, very rich, nice, dark brown to almost black color, depending on the actual art you look at. In some lighting, she looks really just almost matte black in some parts of her body. I noticed her face tends to be more matte than her shoulder and bust region. And I'm not entirely sure if that's like intentional or the lighting that I keep encountering when I'm trying to look at her. But when her shoulders are kind of exposed to light, she has a more chocolatey brown kind of color to her. It's a bit warmer, but she has her massive witch hat that really just cast a shadow, and they went with a really, really rich dark shadow. So it really depends on the lighting if she's going to present more chocolatey or just actually just so dark that she's almost completely black as a character skin. And then her dress is kind of I would say it's kind of like a almost a skin tight leather dress around the bust region with a kind of purple half toga with bell sleeves off the shoulder too. And then a wraparound kind of sari style skirt just to kind of describe it vaguely. I only really go as far as her chest region, and my dog sneezed. But yeah, my illustration only goes to really the chest region, but the toga is kind of on display because it has a very frayed, torn kind of style to it on one shoulder. Then it has really lovely like white embellishments along the kind of collar or like hem of the chest region, along the toga, and that also matches embellishments on her hat and kind of this weird drapery thing that she has going on. The embellishments are also on the sleeves, but I don't have the sleeves in this drawing because I didn't really want to draw hands when I didn't have the ability to erase. I don't have the confidence for that when I'm not in the kind of art realm mentally. But the main kind of description of the recluse is that she is a witch of the deep forest. And she definitely wields ancient sorceries. And I love all of those words in tandem with each other. You can kind of pick up any sort of weapon and any sort of kind of staff / kind of magic utilizing material. So the kind of the Witch of the Deep Woods part is not really relevant in any of the real playstyle. I think that is one place where Elden Ring was really lacking for such a natural, beautiful kind of world that it could have been in the original game. And even in Nightreign, there really is no sort of natural or forest-based magic, so it's just kind of like eh. But her primary staff, the one you start with, does look like some twisted old wood with some plants on it. It's very lovely. I really like the design of it. However, I didn't include it in this illustration because I don't have a lot of values to work with, so I wanted to limit the overlap of items as much as possible. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but basically I just kind of feel like the deep woods aspect kind of isn't really prevalent in her character, especially in design. Her outfit is really impractical. As much as I love bell sleeves, I wear them a lot on my channel. They're incredibly impractical for anything that would involve kind of forest harvesting, surviving in the woods kind of stuff. Her outfit is like, her chest is almost completely out. Like, it's very exposed. Her shoulders are exposed. Then there's just this toga and this incredibly complicated skirt / sari wrap around. It's like when you tie a jacket around your waist using the sleeves, but it goes all the way to her feet region. And it's going to drag, it's going to catch, it's going to snare. It's a very foldy, overlaying fabric type thing. It's just completely impractical for a deep forest witch. Like, I live in the woods. I've talked about it a lot. I got my degree in botany, okay? I love plants. The amount of burrs that this woman would need to pick out of her skirt hem would actually drive me to the brink of insanity. Okay, like I literally could not. Okay, I have enough irritation picking burrs out of my socks. I can't even imagine a long multi-layered skirt thing. I would lose it. So I don't know what forest she's living in, but it ain't any forest I've ever been in. And I live in the mountains, a forested mountain. So I don't really think that her outfit suits that Witch of the Deep Forest kind of ideology, but her outfit does kind of give mysterious, wise, intelligent as a character design. Her clothes look tattered, they look well worn and well kind of kept, but well worn. You know, they don't look like they are brand new. And that kind of does create that feeling of the ancient sorcery. She has frayed wrappings around her cap, and the edges are so much more lightened, you know. So her hat has an almost ombre, but not quite effect, whereas much darker near the part where the up part of the witch hat connects to the hem. And as you get towards the edge, it becomes a soft, more muted lavender sort of look to it. And I think that very much gives warmth and kind of the idea of it being well worn, despite the fact that the hat probably wouldn't actually really fade from a kind of brown to black color to a light purple from being well worn. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't actually do that, but it creates the feeling of it being worn while being aesthetically pleasing to look at. The white hair is like super commonly associated with old magic, old witches, old mages, warlocks, and what have you. Like, if you are an old ancient or work in some sort of ancient sorcery, you probably have white hair in most fantasy, or there's at least one character that does. So the white hair, it's probably more likely like a stereotype, but it really does give the ancient sorcery, and it looks so nice against her skin. It is such a nice, stark contrast, immediate contrast to her skin, and it provides the kind of light value that you need to help differentiate from kind of the hat shadow to her face. Her color palette is very, it's really not fun. Like, her character palette is like really not fun in terms of the actual outfit. So it really is her hair that brings a lightness and a vividness to her design. Her colors are really just black, brown, and purple. And the purple is very much a medium tone to maybe close to light toned color. It's kind of giving poured wine on something and just let it sit there and marinate. Like, it's not a rich, bright purple, and so the white hair really is kind of your brightness in kind of a much more medium to dark color palette, and it does a really good job to help distinguish and separate her hat and face from just blending together entirely. Especially, I don't know if it was a modeling decision or a character art decision, but they just used plain black shadows for the back rim of her hat in a lot of the character art. And so if you didn't have that bright, stark hair that even in shadow is still really light, her hat would just completely blend into her face around that region, and it would become really hard to actually distinguish where the hat ends and the character begins. Now, silhouette-wise, that's not a problem. You know, it's a big, bulky hat. That's cool. But when you're actually kind of applying the elements to the character, it's very well... the hair is a good decision to break up the rest of the dark elements and to keep you from getting bogged down by those dark elements, which I really enjoy, right? I like a macabre to dark color palette a lot of the time. However, I really think understanding your values is incredibly important to creating mentally and visually stimulating art with color. Because if you have a bunch of colors that aren't really dark or light, and they're all just medium tones, you're going to have a hard time distinguishing things regardless of actually what colors you're utilizing. It's not going to provide you what you want to be kind of stimulated in that way. Same thing for all dark and all light colors. And it's one of the biggest challenges with creating hyperpop art, because when you're using, which is what a lot of my art kind of tends towards. I wouldn't say I'm quite hyperpop, but I'm getting there when it comes to my marker art. If you would like to see my usual art, I will have a video linked in the card, but you can also just subscribe or go to my channel and click on any video. I don't know if it'll give you a video from recently, but I think I was approaching hyperpop when I started my channel almost 2 years ago now. My anniversary, I think, is at the end of June. Might be the end of July. I'll have to double check that. But I very much do not usually make scratchboard art, I promise. So I approach hyperpop, and the struggle with that is you have to really know your values, because if you don't, you have a lot of vibrant colors that provide a lot of mental stimulation, but they don't create a sense of depth. And so you need to use vibrant or punchy colors, but understand which ones are darker and more medium to dark toned than those closer to light and neon colors to create the illusion of depth in the piece without utilizing muted colors, or utilizing muted colors in just the way you need to still provide that depth without making it look muddy or grayed out. You know, it's just kind of how the combination works, and it's a challenge. So I really liked the decision to have a mostly dark color palette and have white be the light accent color. White is kind of the color that really just provides that break up, you know, it's the embellishments, it's mostly the highlight color too. The highlights really hit her face as almost a white light hitting a matte ball, right? Like, it's not a shiny color, she's not reflective or anything, and that's how her whole outfit is. It very much just diffuses kind of softly across everything. I would say that her dress looks like it's probably a pleather texture, you know? That trashy pleather feeling and texture that's super kind of like smooth, but if you rub it too hard, it'll probably peel away type thing. That's what it looks like based on the way the light diffuses off of it. But it creates a really visually interesting kind of look to it. I really like it, and I like the drapery, I like the folds. Drapery is one of my biggest artistic challenges, to be honest, and so I really do want to study her drapery as a like actual artistic study digitally. Like put her character on my canvas and just copy down her outfit without color selecting or anything and try and capture the values, either in a monochromatic purple color palette, because that's kind of her color, I guess. But I might do it in black and white. But I really want to study the drapery and how it folds, because her outfit is really just a lot of folding over fabric. And I find that really visually interesting to look at. And I'm really bad at drapery, and it's something I need to study, right? So that kind of aside, I really like just kind of the feeling of the fit and the embellishments. It's simple but visually interesting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't really have the vocabulary to articulate why she attracts me, because I think in any other situation, I wouldn't find her character design actually particularly interesting. And I'm not entirely sure what's really drawing me to her quite this. It's probably because I really like attractive women, like to draw and to create. Most of my art is drawing feminine characters who have either a very visually stimulating aspect of their kind of outfit or character design, or a very interesting personality that I can either relate to the actual kind of way the character exhibits themselves or their character development, who they are as an individual. And so that is kind of where I'm at, generally speaking. I'm not sure what draws me to her quite yet, but I feel like the lore, once I get to the very end of her story, is going to be good, and I'm excited. But also she's a challenge, and I want to talk about that as well. So we're going to talk about scratch art and why specifically the Recluse is a very challenging character for me to try and draw, even when I'm not in an art block. I did already mention that I'm really just not great with drapery. It is probably one of my biggest downfalls, artistically speaking. I don't draw interesting clothing, and even when I do try and draw clothing that is unique or interesting to my character, the actual folding and my understanding of how it overlaps is definitely lacking to an extent that I really need to work on it and just like get better and make myself understand it, right? And I need to do drapery studies, and I do have them booked in my calendar within the coming months to start working on that. So it'll happen. I just haven't quite gotten there yet. So already her character design is more challenging to me, which is why I was really confused when I was drawn to her as the first character that I wanted to draw from Elden Ring Nightreign. And I was confused as to why I was really attracted to her design and couldn't figure out why I was feeling this way or kind of like feeling inclined towards her character. And then another thing that I've never managed to master, no matter how many witch characters that I have tried to make over the years, I cannot for the life of me draw a damn witch hat, okay? I do not know what's wrong with me. I just cannot do it correctly. And now I'm doing it without a mid-tone? What is wrong with me? Who am I? I'm a problem. So what this has taught me is I need to draw witch hats, and I need to study drapery, and I need to stop torturing myself when I'm not feeling artistically inclined, because I am struggling, okay? This was a terrible idea. And so I'm not entirely sure why I thought this was a good decision, but I do actively make the decision to simplify the Recluse's design and her hat a little bit to a much more two-dimensional appearance to try and deal with the issue that I don't have a mid-tone, which is a challenge that I am not particularly accustomed to. I can hatch using the Scratchboard to create the illusion of a mid-tone a little bit, but I can't do it to a degree that I would like to, or I can really rely upon to create the idea that there is a brim leading back towards the kind of like, I don't know, the tall part of the hat. I don't know anything about hats in terms of how to describe them and articulate them to somebody. Also, I know my camera is really, really shaky. I was doing my laundry when recording this video, and my washer and dryer alike shake my entire house. Like, I don't know what it is, but my house just shakes when they're going. And then on top of that, my tripod is really unstable. That's why I usually record at a side angle, this overhead one. So every time I move my desk, which is also really cheap and unstable, everything just shakes. Which also, if you ever hear rattling during my voiceovers, I probably like touched my desk and it started rattling. It's really bad, but it works, so I'm not getting a new one, right? Kind of situation. So sorry about the shaking. And also, I was having to press really, really hard to do the Scratchboard art. I've talked about my chronic illness a lot on my channel, but this is one of the most painful art pieces I have made in a long time. The amount of pressure I was putting with my hand to make the marks on the Scratchboard, and especially when bringing my palette knife in to try and like thicken the lines, I didn't know it at the time, but I have lost most mobility in my right hand temporarily. A complete accident. I didn't think that I was going that hard on my own hand, and it has put a bit of a drop in my art creation. I'm going to only be working on digital art for a little bit, probably not long, just a couple of days to keep myself artistically stimulated, but not like overwork myself, and to not have to use an eraser because it hurts so bad. I'm using my hand exercise ball, but wow, this is really rough on you if you have like hand pain and hand problems, right? So it was intense, but I'm digging at this thing. It didn't come with a tool. It was just a wrapped canvas, to my recollection. This was a gift from somebody, and I don't think they bought it in a kit. I think it was just a wrapped canvas, and they thought I would find it interesting, which I did. I love this. I want to make more. But I didn't know what to do to actually utilize it, so my metal mechanical pencil and my palette knife were the only thing I found that made consistent marks. I did try a nail clipper and a toothpick, and they just were not working at a reliable kind of consistent. The toothpick was useless, actually, to be clear. The toothpick was useless on this thing, but the nail clipper was just not particularly sharp enough to get what I wanted from it. But that's kind of an aside. So I simplified her hat with the intention of making the brim look a lot more upturned to create the illusion that the brim is blending into the back of the hat a bit more sharply, in hopes that that would kind of negate the issue of the lack of midtone, because I usually use shapes to distinguish shadow, but I fill in those shapes with a different color and then a half tone if I'm working digitally, or a hatch if I'm working traditionally with like a paint or something. And so I can't do that here. I can try and hatch in little marks to make it feel like the transition is a bit different, but I can't rely on that as a method for creating or implying the colors or the idea of a shadow quite the way I would want to, especially because I'm working in reverse colors and her hat is very dark. Like her character design, like I mentioned, is very dark. And I don't want to fill anything in completely white. While her hair should be more white than black, I didn't want to make it look like that. I wanted to maintain a lot of the black and have it feel more like a line art for the majority of the illustration, and only put the thick white lines to kind of implicate line art or an incredibly harsh white light. So I used it to also thicken out outlines to separate her as the character from the back of the scratchboard for the most part. And that's because I wanted the scratchboard darkness to feel a lot like her skin. And I liked the idea that it kind of was, and she was maybe like on a black background, black backdrop, and they're generally similar in tone. I do go in and I add hatching to kind of lighten up components of her features, but for the most part, my goal was to keep things kind of feeling pretty simple and put in harsh white lines to separate things from each other and see how that worked out. Now, I'm a line art queen most of the time. I have been doing a lot less line art, like stark black traditional line art, because I've been doing my line art after the fact recently. However, when it comes to that, it is a personal choice, and I do all of my scientific illustrations as if they are completely strictly ink drawings, regardless of if I'm using a dip pen or not. Line art is my thing, and I very much enjoy hatching and creating different tones through that. However, I am working in inverse, and this is something I've never really done before, and definitely not traditionally. I've worked on black backgrounds and I've doodled on them, but I've never tried to create a finished piece on a black background without color. I'll paint something in black and, or not paint something in black, I'll paint a background black or really dark, and then I will lay my colors over, but I've never really just kind of went, yeah, no color at all when it comes to this inverse situation. And so it's very awkward for me trying to reverse my thinking of color and making marks where things are supposed to be lighter as opposed to darker. So it's definitely kind of a reverse situation that kind of challenged me throughout the piece. But that's part of why I really wanted to do Recluse specifically as my first Scratchboard piece. I considered other characters for this week's video, but one, the Nightreign addiction is hard, and two, because Recluse has such dark skin but white hair, I didn't need to worry about distinguishing colors in her actual base character outside of the clothing, right? Like her bare skin. I didn't have to worry about trying to create particularly harsh shadows and having it look really jilted. Is easier if the background is the base skin color. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but if I was doing a character that had really light skin, it would be a lot harder to create that illusion without scratching large chunks off. And I wanted to remain kind of simple and not overcomplicate it at first. Then I wanted to start with the eyes because I can place the rest of the features around the eyes pretty easy, and I can't sketch quite the way I usually would. And she has bright white lashes and dark eyes as well. Her eyes, I think, are a dark brown. It's kind of hard to tell because her hat is always shadowing her face, if they're a dark brown or if they're a lighter brown and then the shadow's making them look dark. But her eyes are also dark, so really it's just her lashes, and her eyebrows, I made them a lot lighter than they actually are supposed to be. So it all really works out to kind of place her facial features because I'm utilizing her most standout components first to actually create the piece, which is her eyes, and then just kind of the baseline idea of where her hat is. And I kind of went crazy with her hair, but I always go crazy with hair, so I wasn't too worried about that in general, right? Throughout the process, by the way, when I remove the entire piece from the screen, I am taking a cloth to it and I am dusting off the black scratching shaving things. And that's because my hand ended up like completely stained with the residue of it, and it was getting all over the place, and it was making it hard to see where my marks were and if they were as even as I wanted them to be. So that was just kind of, if it leaves the screen, I'm just dusting it off with a rag off to the side, so it's not all over my desk and getting even more on me. Like, it was all over me and it left a nasty texture and I hated it. But basically, as I'm going through the process, I'm just kind of trying to build up more and more white areas and use that to kind of push the idea I want. It's really kind of at this stage in the piece a instinct rather than an intelligent decision, because I've done as much as I like mentally think I can understand without trial and error. I don't know how well that articulates, but basically what I'm trying to say is I know the basics of how to create a character, how to do line art, place the facial features, create the ideas I want, I'll do the line art. But now actually making it read how I want to in this reverse situation that I've never done before, it is trial and error for me. It is me just going with the flow and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work to try and further my narrative and make the character look right and how I want it to, you know? I'm pretty reliant on color when I'm doing character art, and I put a lot of fun colors on the character regardless of what their color palette actually is. I really like a strong yellow line on the cheeks, regardless of if there's any yellow in the character at all. I put pinks and cyans all over the place, and it's just because I really like the pizzazz it adds, and it gives you little things to look at with your eyes, right? And I love a good olive green, okay? But now I'm not able to rely on those colors to create that visual stimulation. You know, I can't just put some kind of pink stars on her cheek to make you look at it because there's no color here, right? I can't add funky colors to her eyes to make it look like it's reflecting something interesting at you because there's no color here, right? And it's gonna keep going like that. I can't make the lighting interesting by giving a kind of glow or a hue to anything and adding sharp rim lights or anything because there's nothing to do. So I have to try and challenge myself to think in a way that I haven't thought in a long time, which is just the simplicity of a lack of color. And it was a very good mental challenge for me while in art block, really. This was a very good way to push myself to engage in art in a way that makes me think differently and get outside of the feelings that I was having when trying to do my recluse fan art in my sketchbook, where the colors just weren't working and I wasn't capturing her beauty the way I wanted to, and I didn't feel like the art I was making was my art. And that was really the issue when trying to do a marker illustration of her, was that I just didn't feel like my art was mine. The facial proportions weren't how I wanted them to be, and I didn't feel like I was capturing a mature witch character. I felt like I was a beginner who was trying to figure things out for the first time. And that was just an issue that I was feeling emotionally. And a refresh and a new look at art is usually an excellent way for me personally to challenge those feelings of failure or me not knowing what I'm doing. or the idea that I'm experiencing an artistic setback, because I'm probably not. I probably am just having a week that's not really going good for me, because it is not, and I'm just not able to get my head in the right place to actually create the art that I want to create. That, and I also really just want to do Emma Frost fan art, because I think that she is really squishy looking, and I want to just draw her thighs. Do with that what you will. But I really want to do Emma Frost fan art, but I also don't want to draw blonde hair. I really hate rendering blonde hair. It's just not a go for me. But then I also want to work on illustrations for my character Loki. And I also want to do more illustrations of Eris. And so, like, all of these different things that I want to do are tugging me in different directions. So when I'm doing something else, I'm mentally elsewhere. And my heart just hasn't settled on what I really want to be creating right now. And it's been really hard to get into that flow state where I can just draw and not think. And that's part of why I was doing Recluse fan art in the first place before pulling out the Scratchboard. I really like her character design. I really like her, and she's new to me. Like, I don't even play Emma Frost. I'm a horrible tank. I am the worst tank you will ever meet. I tell everybody, whoever asks for an extra tank, I cannot tank. We will all die, okay? We're not getting anywhere. I'm bad at it. I'm terrible at tanking damage, okay? I need to be far away, hitting things from a distance, okay? It doesn't work for me. It's not my skill set, personally speaking. And so I don't even play her. But she's been around for long enough that I've seen a lot of her. You know, I've seen a lot of cosplays of her and other fan art of her, and I feel like mentally stimulated in that regard. Like, I don't need to contribute to it necessarily to feel like satisfied, I guess you could say. And I'm gonna get that feeling with Recluse, but I just happen to be creating art and wanted to do fan art, not original character art this week, because I was in that art slump and I really just was not in the mood. And she was my target, right? And so it really worked out for me with the timing of Nightreign's release and these feelings, but where are these feelings coming from, really briefly? It's not uncommon to discuss imposter syndrome on my channel, and those feelings that you will never amount to being as good as the artists that you worship. There will always be someone better than you, and all of those feelings and those ideas and the kind of emotional turmoil that comes with that. I don't necessarily know that that is what is happening right now for me, though. Rather, I'm finding that this feeling and this disillusionment with art recently is coming from the push for artistic employment in a way that monetarily compensates me, and that my value as an artist is tied to my ability to financially survive off of being an artist. Now, I am fully employed for the majority of the year at a school as a multi-subject tutor. I work full-time, right? Full-time hours, and I'm only off during the summer, where I do kind of struggle with employment issues, because in America, you cannot go on unemployment if you work in education, even if you are not somebody who receives a salary. If you are hourly paid, you still cannot receive unemployment. So it is difficult during the summer at times, but I don't need a job because I have very strict saving habits to ensure that I don't have these issues, right? I'm fine. You know, I put money aside throughout the year to prepare for my summer. However, a lot of the discussions that have surrounded me recently, now that I am freshly 22, I am a year into my MFA at the end of this summer, and I am working towards becoming an art teacher or working in the industry in some capacity. I find that more and more discussions around me are centered around me being an artist that can monetarily survive off of their art, rather than me being an artist because I love to create art. I am an artist, and it is something that I do because I want to be one. Now, I've discussed a couple of times that you do not need to be a professional artist to be an artist. If you are a hobbyist artist, you are still an artist. You might be a different artist, if you just do coloring book stuff, maybe you're just not an artist in the same capacity that somebody who is going to be in galleries and we're going to talk about in history books 100 years from now. But that doesn't devalue you as an individual because you create art differently or in a way that is not designed to be mass consumed, or you do it mostly for your own entertainment and you like to share your coloring pages with people who also like coloring videos or coloring content on the internet. There is value in your art, even if your artistic skill set lies in exclusively coloring and you're just really not somebody who is built to do the actual thinking to create the line art that you're filling in. You don't have to be an artist in that caliber. And if you are a hobby artist, I don't see any reason why your art is less valuable than somebody who makes a bunch of money a year off of their art. And I also don't see why artists who financially struggle should be deemed less valuable than artists who are making all of their financial needs met off of their artistic creations. You know what I mean? And that's something that I don't like the dialogue around. I think that all real artists, because AI image generation is not art, I will say it a billion times, it is not, it doesn't have human emotions, it lacks the capacity to think creatively, it makes a bunch of mistakes because it is incapable of creative and original thinking and making design decisions or having any sort of soul or ability to kind of interpret information and expand upon existing ideas in any capacity or provide its own personal experience as a source of value or narrative to the piece, so on and so forth. I've talked about this a lot, so I don't need to go any further with it. And I can make an entire video discussing it. If people want me to condense my thoughts all into one location, you can let me know down in the comments if that's something you're interested in. Or I can make a Tumblr/blog post and link it in my community feed, depending on what y'all want. But my point is, if you are a hobby artist, you are no less of an artist just because you do not financially profit off of it. And I think that that is okay. However, a lot of my worth as an artist has been equated to the fact that I am not constantly trying to monetarily survive exclusively off of my art in the circles that I have to surround myself in for my professional development to become an art teacher eventually, right? Basically, my experience is, why aren't you selling this yet? Why aren't you making products like this yet? You said you want to do this and you would love to do this one day. Why haven't you started it yet? And I haven't started it yet because I'm in no position to actually financially create it or have the follower base to collaborate with somebody who would help me to create it because I can't ship from my home and I can't package orders. I utilize a print-on-demand service on my website because if people want prints of my work, that is wonderful. And I highly encourage you to put whatever you want on your wall, but I'm not in a position to package orders, and I'm of the mindset, if somebody wants it, that's cool, but I don't need to sell prints of my work to survive, and so I'm not going to run an Etsy shop. I have a Redbubble account, I have a lot of my photography on there, and that is cool, and I really appreciate it when people want my things, but I also think in this economy that art is a luxury, and I shouldn't expect people to pay me to survive. And I am content just creating content for my own personal enjoyment, sharing my art with people because I love to do it, and not make it my income, right? I'm happy doing this the way I am. But that doesn't mean that the thoughts and the conversations don't start to haunt me and make me feel like I'm less valuable. Because my goal isn't to be a full-time artist and make a surviving wage this way, right? Like, if it happens one day, I will take it and I will run with it and I will absolutely do everything I can to keep that. But it's not my goal that I'm hunting down and chasing down. I'm happy at my job, and I am happy to continue creating art because I love it and not because it is what will feed me or pay my health insurance, right? And it has been very difficult emotionally to grapple with the feelings that come with this, despite the fact that I don't even believe in the ideology that these feelings are coming from. And it's just been very difficult the past couple weeks with my MFA starting back up to have to revisit these thoughts fresh for the summer term. Ultimately, though, I do feel like creating this piece did make me feel a lot better, and that creating fan art is a very effective way for kind of challenging these thoughts and finding community and comfort within things that you love and art that you love. Is part of why I love fan art, because it allows for you to reimagine characters you love in a new way and kind of participate in the community that you're happy to be a part of, you know? And I really do want to make more fan art and post more of it in the coming months. I'm always weird about posting it on my YouTube channel because I want people to be here because they like listening to me and they like my original art, because I'm not always going to make fan art. And I don't want people to expect me to make a lot of fan art because I just don't have the drive, I guess you could say, to kind of keep myself on one track long enough to make enough fan art to entertain people. And I do a lot of chibi doodles, and I don't think my chibi doodles are good. They're kind of bad, but I like making them, and that's kind of my number one form of fan art. Also, I can't draw hot men. Sorry, Halson. I really want to make Halson fan art, but I just can't draw muscles. I need to work on it. I know. I'll do it. I'll study it. I promise. I swear. But ultimately, I really enjoyed drawing Recluse. She made me feel a lot better. I do want to do more fan art and draw my OCs as they kind of come up inspiration-wise, and I hope that that will quell the issue of me feeling tugged in directions. But ultimately, how do you guys feel about my scratch art? Is this a total flop? Was this a great idea? Are you interested in making scratch art or seeing more scratch art one of these days? Have you played Elden Ring Nightreign? All of those good questions. Tell me your favorite character if you have played down below to look at and to play, because my favorite is the Revenant. It's not a spoiler, but like the Revenant, when you get to them, my favorite to play personally. Anyway, like if you like, dislike if you dislike, subscribe if you would like to see more of my content, and I promise I will be more cheerful next week because I have fun stuff planned for next week, artistically speaking, and I am going to enjoy it no matter what. I refuse to not have fun next week. I'm going to make it happen. I'm determined. So I will see you next week at 9 a.m. PST for my Saturday video. For now, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, wherever you are. And with all of this being said, bye-bye.